Have you ever stopped to wonder why good people always seem to lose? Why even when giving their best, offering everything they have, always being kind and understanding, they end up crushed by a reality that seems to neither acknowledge nor value their effort? Perhaps you felt this pain, this silent frustration that builds up until it becomes unbearable. It's as if, instead of receiving gratitude, you receive contempt, or worse, are completely ignored. The world taught you early on that being good is the key to being loved, to being accepted, to being worthy of remaining in others' hearts. But what if I told you that this is just an illusion, a trap the mind itself builds to avoid the pain of not being accepted? You might be asking yourself if kindness is truly a virtue, or if it's just an unconscious strategy to avoid conflicts and rejections. Jung spoke of the shadow, that dark side we all carry and which often hides behind smiles and rehearsed gentleness. It is there, in the silence between the smile and the tear, that the silent defeat of good people is born. It is there that kindness transforms into a prison, where the desire to please everyone becomes a sentence of invisibility. And while this happens, you lose yourself, because every yes you give to others is a no you give to yourself. And the price is high, so high that sometimes you only realize it when you're already in pieces, fragmented, like a puppet guided by the invisible strings of others' expectations. In this video, we'll walk together through this dark labyrinth that is the mind of the good person. We will explore the hidden layers of kindness and understand why it transforms into defeat, into silence, into pain. Because sometimes the good person's greatest enemy isn't others, but their own inability to say no. This video is for you who are tired of giving until exhaustion, who have wondered why it's never enough, who have tasted the bitter flavor of being forgotten after all you've done. Here, we'll discover together that kindness doesn't have to be a sentence of defeat. It can be strength, but only when it comes from truth and not from fear. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. It's time to dive into the psychology behind the silent defeat of good people. The mask of kindness is often the good person's first prison. It's that gentle expression, the smile that appears even when the heart is bleeding, the gesture of yielding to avoid others' discomfort. From an early age, we learn that being gentle is a virtue, and it is when it comes from a true heart. But in many cases, gentleness is the veil that hides pain, fear, insecurity. It's as if to deserve love, you need to hide everything that is ugly, everything that is imperfect, everything that might make others abandon you. This mask is so well sewn that you yourself forget where what is yours ends and what others expect of you begins. It becomes a role you play so well that you even believe in it. But deep down, there is an emptiness that observes you, an emptiness that asks, who am I really? The kindness that becomes a mask isn't a virtue, it's survival. It's the fear of being rejected, of being hated, of being left behind. And every time you annul yourself to fit into someone else's world, you reinforce this mask and move a little further away from who you really are. The mask of gentleness is treacherous because it makes you believe you're doing good. But in reality, you're fleeing from conflict, from anger, from the loneliness that arises when you show yourself fully. Have you noticed how good people avoid arguments? How they prefer to swallow their own truth rather than face the disappointed look of someone they love? This is the price of the mask. You become liked, but not respected. And respect is the foundation of any true relationship. When kindness is used as a shield, it doesn't protect, it imprisons. It takes courage to remove the mask, to say no when your heart screams, enough. Only then can kindness blossom as strength and not as weakness. And you, have you looked at your own mask today? Have you noticed where you've hidden your anger, your sadness, your strength? Because sometimes, the greatest proof of love you can give yourself is to have the courage to tear off your own mask and finally recognize yourself. In the silence of kindness dwells a shadow that the good person rarely dares to face. It's the part of themselves that contains suppressed anger, unexpressed frustration, accumulated sadness. Jung taught us that the shadow is everything you've repressed in the name of feeling accepted, everything you've disowned for fear of losing others' love. The good person, then, is someone who, throughout life, has learned to silence their anger to avoid hurting, to repress their sadness to avoid worrying, to bury their own desires so that others can shine. But this shadow doesn't disappear, it waits, and it becomes increasingly dense, more uncomfortable, more eager for space. It's this shadow that one day explodes, whether in the form of uncontrollable crying, an anxiety attack, or unbearable loneliness. Because no one can forever suppress what is most human to them. Anger is vital energy. It's the fire that reminds us we're alive, that we're worthy of respect. When the good person ignores this anger, they turn it into poison for themselves. A poison that erodes self-esteem, undermines inner strength, and extinguishes their own light. And without realizing it, the good person becomes a hostage to their own kindness, a slave to a role not meant for them but to please the world. Have you ever caught yourself saying yes when you wanted to say no? Have you smiled while inside you felt like screaming? This is the good person's shadow, the part they fear showing because they think that if they do, they will lose love, respect, acceptance. But the truth is, as long as you don't embrace your shadow, your kindness will continue to be a bargaining chip to keep others close. And in the end, you will have no one, not even yourself. Perhaps it's time to look at your shadow and ask, what am I hiding from myself? Because only when you recognize your own darkness can light, finally, be born from within. The addiction to approval is one of the most subtle and dangerous prisons for the good person. It's that almost uncontrollable desire to please, to be accepted, to be seen favorably by everyone. It's as if, with every smile received, every compliment, you feel a small dose of relief, a comfort against the constant fear of not being enough. But behind this relief hides an emotional dependence that corrodes the soul. It's like an addiction, and science explains it. Every time you receive external validation, your brain releases dopamine, the pleasure neurotransmitter. And like any addiction, this pleasure is fleeting, and soon you feel the need for more. You become a hostage to what others think of you. And to maintain this flow of approval, you begin to mold yourself to others' expectations. You smile when you don't want to smile. You say yes when you want to say no. You offer help when all you wanted was to rest. Little by little, you dissolve into pieces of others. And when you realize it, you no longer know who you are. You only know what others expect you to be. Neuroscience shows us that the fear of rejection activates the brain's amygdala, the same region linked to the survival instinct. That's why saying no hurts so much. That's why contradicting someone is like an attack on our own identity. But deep down, you know you need to break this cycle. Because as long as others' approval is your fuel, you will always be driving the car of life with someone else's hands on the wheel. Perhaps it's time to ask, whose life am I living? And more than that, why do I still believe that I will only be loved if I don't show who I truly am? It takes courage to break free from the approval addiction. Courage to look in the mirror and say, I don't need to be perfect to be worthy. Courage to understand that true love isn't bought with smiles or favors, but conquered with the authenticity of someone who has already learned to love themselves. And that courage, my friend, is the first step to stop silently losing. It is the first step to finally be whole. There's a hidden effect few notice in kindness, something that goes beyond apparent gentleness. It's the mirror effect of kindness. When you are good, when you offer a hand even when no one reaches back, you become a mirror for the people around you. And this mirror doesn't always reflect light. It reflects, above all, the shadows of others. Because kindness, when true, when it doesn't seek rewards, is like a sharp blade. It cuts through the masks of those who aren't ready to see their own darkness. You, with your dedication, your presence, your infinite willingness, end up showing people how empty they themselves are, how much they run from themselves, how little courage they have to give of themselves as you do. And that hurts them. It's easier to attack the mirror than to face the reflection. That's why often the good person is targeted by criticism, ridicule, silent rejections. Not because they did something wrong, but because their presence awakens a wound in others that they don't know how to handle. Jung would say that we project onto others what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. Thus, the good person becomes the scapegoat for others' insecurities. It's easier to say they are weak, foolish, naive, than to admit that they had the courage to be who they are, to give without expecting anything in return. This mirror effect is cruel because it makes the good person believe there's something wrong with them. But the truth is, often, kindness illuminates the darkest corners of the soul of whoever is around, and not everyone is ready for that light. Have you ever felt this? Have you noticed how some people pull away when you show your heart? How others try to diminish you so they don't feel so small? It's not about you. It's about what you awaken in others. And that's why kindness, despite being beautiful, is also dangerous. Because to be good is, above all, to have the courage to face the gaze of those who are not ready to see themselves. And sometimes, it's in that gaze that you find the reason for your loneliness. Generosity has always been seen as a virtue, as a way to touch people's hearts and create bonds of affection. But there is a cruel paradox in the good person's generosity. The more they give, the more they distance themselves from themselves. It's as if every act of giving were, at the same time, a flight from the loneliness that aches in silence, a flight from the anger that insists on bubbling up inside, a flight from the truth that sometimes no one returns what you offer with such care. Generosity becomes a way to forget your own wounds, to fill the void that throbs in your soul. Have you ever stopped to think how many times you were generous just to avoid the pain of being alone? How many times did you reach out hoping someone would hold your hand, but all you found was emptiness? It's as if the good person offers more than they have, betting that if they give enough, they will finally be seen, finally be loved, finally be recognized. But generosity that comes from fear is not generosity. It's dependence. It's the attempt to buy with small pieces of yourself the love you never had the courage to demand. And, as you empty yourself so that others can be filled, you discover that no one is in a hurry to give back. Nietzsche said that we need to learn to love ourselves before giving to the world, because those who don't take care of themselves first offer what they don't have, and those who give everything they have without keeping anything for themselves one day discover they have nothing left to give. This is the paradox of generosity. The good person believes that giving is always noble, but in practice, giving without measure is an invitation to your own disappearance. And in the end, no one realizes that, behind every smile, there was a silent plea for care, for reciprocity. Because true giving isn't about annihilating yourself, it's about overflowing with what is already abundant. And the good person needs to learn that being generous isn't about giving up yourself, but about sharing only what doesn't destroy you. There's a silent pain that the good person carries in their chest, the pain of not being recognized. You might have tried your hardest, given your best, given up everything to be there for others. And still, at the end of the day, what you find is silence, a silence that echoes louder than any word. It's as if your kindness were invisible, as if everything you did disappeared as soon as it was given. You look around and realize that no matter how much you gave, no one remembers. No one thanks you. No one returns what you gave. And this makes you question if it's worth continuing to be good. It's a wound that bleeds in silence because you learned that complaining is ugly, that demanding gratitude is petty, that expecting recognition is selfishness. So you swallow that lump in your throat, pretend it doesn't hurt, keep smiling as if you feel nothing. But you do feel it. You feel it because human beings are made of exchanges, of reciprocity, of shared affection. And when the scale always tips to the side of the receiver, the weight of ingratitude becomes unbearable. Nietzsche reminds us that ingratitude is not born of malice, but of the human inability to perceive the effort others make for us. And this hurts, because it makes the good person feel invisible, dispensable, as if they have no value. This is the deepest wound of a good soul, that of giving so much that no one else notices you are there, and meanwhile, you disappear, fragmenting into pieces of help, of comfort, of presence that no one returns. The pain of not being recognized is more than just sadness. It's the feeling that perhaps the problem is with you, but it's not. The truth is that the world gets used to those who are always available, and whoever is always available comes to be seen as obvious, as certain, as a resource, not as a person. Perhaps it's time to ask, who is taking care of me while I take care of everyone? Because sometimes, the greatest demonstration of self-love is learning to recognize yourself before expecting others to do so. Submission is more than a learned behavior. It's a mark etched in the brain, a scar that makes us choose the safest path to avoid confrontation. Neuroscience teaches us that the brain's amygdala, responsible for fear and defense responses, is activated every time we feel the threat of rejection or disapproval. It's as if the brain screams, "Stay where it's safe, don't provoke, don't say no." And the good person, conditioned early on to avoid conflict, bows before this inner voice. They make concessions they didn't want to make, accept blame that isn't theirs, yield spaces they should occupy. It's an automatic, almost instinctive movement. And this is where the tragedy lies. Kindness that could be a strength becomes submission, and submission becomes a habit. Every time you lower your head to avoid discomfort, your brain understands that silence is the best way to survive. and thus you gradually program yourself not to exist fully. Submission, then, is not just an emotional choice. It's a neurobiological trap that binds you to a predictable script. Smile, concede, swallow the scream. Each time you choose to remain silent, you reinforce the neural pathway of fear, conformity, and surrender. And the more you do this, the harder it is to break the cycle. Kindness gets confused with passivity, and the good person doesn't realize that the amygdala, this small fear center in the brain, is in command. Jung said that we are governed by everything we refuse to confront, and as long as the good person does not face their own fear of rejection, they will continue to repeat submission like background music that no one notices, but that dictates all their steps. Perhaps it's time to learn to silence the amygdala, to realize that fear is just a part of you, and not the master of your life. Because true strength is not in never feeling fear, but in not letting it decide for you. In the silence of kindness, an emotional puppet often hides, a being who learned very early on to live according to the strings that others pull. It's as if every gesture, every word, every choice were, in reality, an attempt to meet others' expectations. Have you ever felt this way? As if every move you make is monitored, evaluated, judged? As if there were always someone holding the invisible strings that decide where you go, what you feel, what you should do. The good person, without realizing it, hands over control of their own life to those around them. They mold themselves not to displease, hide not to confront, offer themselves so as not to be forgotten, and thus, they gradually transform into a piece of a game they did not create. Jung reminds us that the shadow grows when we are not true to ourselves, and when you live as a puppet, the shadow accumulates until it overflows. It's that feeling of exhaustion that doesn't go away, of loneliness that is present even when surrounded by people, of a weight in the chest that no one sees. Because the puppet may smile, but inside it carries the silence of someone who never had the courage to cut their own strings. With every move you make to please, you reinforce the emotional dependence of whoever controls you. It's subtle. Sometimes it's a boss who makes you feel indispensable only to discard you later. Sometimes it's a friend who asks everything of you without ever being there when you need them. Sometimes it's a family that only loves you when you annul yourself. And the puppet dances to the music, believing that this is love, that this is care, but it's not. It's manipulation. It's power disguised as affection. Perhaps it's time to look at the strings that bind you and ask, whose hand is holding them? Because only those who learn to cut their own strings discover the freedom to exist fully. And deep down, this is the good person's great journey, to move from being a puppet to becoming the author of their own story. The search for harmony is one of the most seductive traps that imprison the good person. From an early age, they learn that maintaining peace is more important than saying what they feel, that smiling is nobler than confronting, that staying silent is more virtuous than questioning. And so they build a harmony that, little by little, transforms into a golden prison. Because the price of harmony is high, and the one who pays is always the same, the one who yields. Have you noticed how the good person is the first to apologize even when they haven't made a mistake? How they give up their own dreams to keep others close? How they silence their own pain so as not to bother anyone? It's as if the fear of breaking harmony were greater than the fear of disappearing. But the problem is that by trying to keep everyone happy, they gradually fade away, losing their color, their sparkle, their essence. The harmony that seemed so beautiful becomes the backdrop for a loneliness that no one sees. Montaigne reminded us that the worst prison is the one we build with our own hands, and the good person's harmony is made of this: silent concessions, swallowed words, postponed gestures. Every time you avoid confrontation so as not to hurt others, you hurt yourself. Every time you accept silence so as not to disappoint, you disappoint your soul. And little by little, you cease to exist as a subject and become merely an object of pleasure. The harmony that the good person builds is like a sandcastle by the sea. All it takes is a high tide, a criticism, an abandonment, a disappointment, and everything collapses. And who is left? The good person, alone with the ruins of what they tried to keep standing. Perhaps it's time to understand that true harmony is not born from self-annihilation, but from the courage to exist as you are, without apologizing for it. Because whoever builds their own harmony on the basis of fear pays the highest price, their own freedom. The labyrinth of solitude is the place where the good person finally finds themselves, or at least what's left after giving so much. It's a dark path made of narrow corridors, of walls that reflect old voices saying that to be loved one must give up oneself. It is there that in the silence of dawn, the good person discovers that no one is coming to find them, that no one will return what they offered for free. And it is at that moment that solitude reveals itself as the greatest of all teachers. Because away from external expectations, the good person finally listens to their own voice, the one that always remained in the background. It's a trembling voice at first, almost a whisper, but it carries the strength of someone who has been ignored for so long. Jung taught us that the encounter with the shadow is also the encounter with the soul. And in the labyrinth of solitude, the good person discovers that true kindness cannot exist without first having gone through the pain of getting lost, because only those who get lost can find themselves. It is there in the silence that hurts that the deepest questions arise. Who am I without the demands of others? What do I feel when I'm not molding myself to fit? And what remains of me after so much breaking myself apart to be accepted? The labyrinth is not a punishment. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop chasing applause and start applauding your own courage to exist. Perhaps you still fear this solitude, but it is the only way back home. Because only those who sit in the dark learn to recognize the light that comes from within. And it is in the labyrinth that the good person realizes. It's not about being seen, it's about seeing yourself. It's not about being loved, it's about loving yourself. And in the end, it's only then that kindness ceases to be weakness and becomes strength. The philosophy of suffering is a road few dare to travel, because it demands looking at pain without seeking anesthesia, without wanting to flee, without trying to transform it into something beautiful just to please others. Nietzsche said that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how, and it is into this why that the good person needs to delve, because the pain they feel is not just sadness, it is the price of having always chosen others before themselves. It's as if, by trying to maintain harmony, they had dug their own wound. Pain then becomes the voice of the soul, a whisper that asks, "And you? Where do you stand in your own life?" The philosophy of suffering teaches us that pain, when well embraced, can be transformed into strength. It's like the fire that purifies gold. It's the discomfort that removes the impurities of being. But for this, one needs the courage to look at the wound and ask, what does it have to teach me? Because all pain carries a hidden lesson about boundaries, about self-love, about the courage to say enough. Clarissa Pinkola Este said that the wild woman, and the authentic man too, is reborn from the ashes when she embraces her own suffering as a teacher. And this is what the good person needs to learn, that being good is not annihilating oneself, that helping others is not synonymous with dying for them, that sometimes the greatest form of love is refusing to continue giving when there is no reciprocity. Suffering is the school where we learn to separate what is ours from what belongs to others. It is the place where we learn to say no. No to abuse, no to imposed silence, no to guilt that is not ours. Because pain has the power to remind us that we are alive, to teach us that our kindness cannot be a currency to buy love. And it is in this school that the good person discovers that being strong is not never getting hurt. It is learning not to abandon oneself. The art of saying no is perhaps the most difficult lesson for the good person, and the most liberating. It's as if, with each swallowed no, they surrender a small part of their own soul to be molded by the hands of whoever is manipulating them. Saying no is more than a word. It's an act of self-love, an affirmation that you exist and that your life also has value. But the good person learned that saying no is being selfish, being ungrateful, being less loved. And so, throughout life, they transformed each no into a suffocated yes, a silent concession that only served to fuel the emotional dependence of others. Depth psychology teaches us that the fear of saying no is, often, the fear of losing affection, losing acceptance, losing the little one has. But paradoxically, it is precisely this no that can restore the dignity that misunderstood kindness steals. Because saying no is also saying yes to yourself. It's saying, I matter, I exist, I deserve respect. Eckhart Tolle says that when we say yes to everything so as not to lose the other, we are actually saying no to ourselves. And that is the type of betrayal that hurts deepest, the one that makes us sick inside. The art of saying no is not about hurting others. It's about not hurting yourself anymore. It's about understanding that true love does not require you to fade away to fit. It's about realizing that whoever abandons you for saying no, in reality, never loved you. They just used you. The good person needs to learn that they are not obligated to carry the world on their shoulders, that they are not responsible for everyone's happiness, that they are not a repository of others' expectations. Saying no is the first step to freeing yourself from the emotional puppet and taking on your own worth. Because only those who learn to say no with self-love also learn to say yes with freedom. Rebuilding your own identity is like gathering pieces of a broken mirror. Each fragment reflects something you were, something you tried to be, something you ceased to be to fit into someone else's world. The good person spends so much time molding themselves to others' expectations that, when they look in the mirror, they barely recognize their own image. And it is then that the question arises, one that hurts and liberates at the same time. Who am I when I'm not trying to please anyone? Jung reminds us that individuation, the process of becoming who one is, requires courage to look both inward and outward. Inward, to reclaim what was abandoned. Outward, to perceive what is truly ours and what belongs to others. The good person needs to gather courage to explore their own shadows and find in them not only pain, but also power, because the shadow holds everything you were forced to hide to survive. The anger that turned into a smile, the pain that turned into a joke, the will that turned into silence. And it is from this reunion that the reconstruction begins. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about being whole. It's understanding that there is no light without shadow, no strength without vulnerability, no freedom without limits. It's learning to say yes with your heart, but also knowing how to say no firmly. It's choosing who deserves your time, your energy, your care. It's learning that the love you seek so much in others only arises when you love yourself first. Montaigne said that one who respects themselves accepts no less than they deserve, and the good person needs to relearn to respect themselves. They need to understand that true generosity begins with self-care, because in the end, rebuilding identity is like being reborn. It's recognizing that to be whole, you can no longer live in pieces. It's having the courage to occupy your own place in the world, not as one who begs to be accepted, but as one who knows they are worthy of being there. We have reached the end of this journey that began with a simple question, yet loaded with pain. Why do good people always lose? Perhaps the answer is that losing is not about failure. It's about not knowing when to say enough. It's about not realizing that sometimes being too good is the most silent way to abandon yourself. You don't need to stop being good to stop suffering. You just need to learn that kindness is not servitude, that helping others is not synonymous with disappearing, that love is not a sacrifice that makes you vanish. It's a space where you also belong. The silent defeat of good people does not arise from the world's malice, but from their own inability to respect themselves. The time has come for you to understand that no one will value you if you don't value yourself, that the silence that hurts can be transformed into strength, and that the shadow that scares you can become light if you have the courage to face it. That saying no is not being bad, it's being fair to your own soul, and that no one will save you from yourself. That is your part. Therefore, this video is not just to show you why you have lost so much. It is to remind you that there is still time to win. But the victory I speak of here is not against others. It is against the voice that makes you believe you need to be small to be loved. The victory is being you, with all the strength, all the light, and all the shadows that are part of who you are. And if you have made it this far, perhaps you are ready to take that step. Because deep down, no one fears the good person. What people fear is the strength he discovers when he stops hiding behind kindness. Be good, but be whole. Because when you allow yourself to be true, no defeat can stop you. It's time to break the silence and take your place in the world. Because you were not born to be anyone's puppet. You were born to be the protagonist of your own story.